Hello, welcome to the Black Girl's Guide to Bachelor Nation. This is video 2, where we're taking Rachel Lindsay's historic season as the first Black Bachelorette, breaking it down to introduce viewers to the concepts, people, places, and things that happen in Bachelor Nation. I'm grouping these episodes together this way because they all pretty much follow the same format. There's usually a group date at the beginning, where there are multiple men who go do an activity, and that's usually the first part of the day. And then the second part is usually sort of a mini cocktail party. Some people refer to it as the after party, where Rachel will mingle with the guys who did the group date, and there's usually a rose given out at this activity. The second thing that usually happens in the episode is there's usually a one-on-one date where Rachel will take one of the suitors out for a two-part date. They'll usually do an activity in the morning, and then they'll usually do a formal dinner at night, and there's usually either a rose given or not given. And then there's usually a cocktail party with all of the men, followed by a rose ceremony. When people are referring to it, or you're listening to interviews with the contestants, they will refer to it as weeks instead of as episodes. All right, at the start of episode 2, Chris Harrison welcomes the men to the Bachelor Mansion. He explains the rules and leaves a date card on the table. Now, the date card will list the men who are going on this date, and then they will have a saying, which is kind of like a clue or a hint as to what's coming up. Man chats are typically back at the mansion when there's a date going on. And we have these shots of the men who didn't get selected for the date having conversations, either talking about their self-doubts or bad-mouthing the other contestants. And here's the thing, let's talk about gameplay for a moment. Really, shit-talking never wins on this show. If you're gonna go bad-mouth another contestant, before you get to the end of the episodes, you've maybe spent a total of 2 hours with the lead. So why anybody would spend their 10 minutes in a given week talking about one of the other contestants is way beyond me. The thing is that you get caught up in the petty drama because you're sleeping in those bunk beds, and the lead sees nothing of it. Now, it makes for good TV. We're all invested in the petty drama, but the lead doesn't know what's happening. It just makes you look bad. And is a concept that it is basically a person who is there for fame instead of for the lead. And a very poignant talking head with Rachel, where she talks about the pressures of being the first Black lead. She starts crying, and she starts saying that people are going to question the decisions she's making, and she knows what people are going to say about her. And it is the most heartbreaking thing I've seen on reality TV in a long time. This is the rough that comes with the smooth by being a pioneer and stepping into this completely white world. You just see Rachel, who has dealt with the DeMario situation and the drama, and she's done all of this with such grace and class, like have a moment where she just can't keep it together. They go to BarkFest, sponsored by BarkBox, which is basically a pool party for dogs. They let Copper go run and play, and they have a nice conversation in a kiddie pool full of plastic balls. In this conversation, they talk about moving for love. Rachel says that she's learned the hard way, that she is willing to move for love, and Peter dances with Copper. It is the most adorable thing. And then we move on to the evening portion of the date. In the evening portion of the date, Rachel says that Peter is bringing the romance, and she asks him why he is still single. I hate that question. He had a tough breakup, so bad that he went to see a therapist. He went to see a therapist. Rachel's like, I went to see a therapist. We have so much in common. They kiss, she initiated it, and they go outside to watch fireworks and make out some more. I also want to take this moment to talk about Brian and his trajectory. Let's just pull out what Brian has done to date. Gets out of the limo, speaks to her in Spanish, says something intriguing. He takes the bold step of being the first person to kiss her on the first night. He gets the first impression rose. He makes the most out of his time on the second cocktail party. He says, I'm going to have your back. Like, I'm going to be strong for you, and I want you to be strong with me. What are your concerns? Let me address them. You're concerned that I'm too charming? Let me tell you that I'm 100% genuine. He's on the largest group date ever. All of this drama is happening, and he manages to steal her away and have this conversation about what her concerns were. He's really thinking about what she's saying and how to move forward. He gets the largest group date rose. Now he has the biggest one-on-one in the season to date. I mean, maybe the second biggest next to the first one. But he got the first impression rose. He doesn't need the first one-on-one date. So you never see him getting jealous of the other guys and the time that she's spending with them. And he tells her that he's falling in love with her. Sometimes I might doubt that or be like, oh, they're in the Bachelor bubble. I think that he's really, genuinely, truly smitten with Rachel. I want to take this moment to talk about Rachel and her display of sexuality. I feel like so often in these shows, you get one of two things. You either get the loud, boisterous, over-sexualized, hyper-sexualized Black woman who is like going after all these people, or on the other end of things, you get the Black woman who's super chaste, super into respectability politics, won't hold hands, won't kiss anybody for fear of being considered the former. I'm appreciating Rachel being herself, being in her humanity, being in her sexuality, exploring these men as much as it repulses me, kissing them, trying it out, being open, and I know that one of her love languages is physical touch. I am thankful to her for being willing to show that to us on camera. The date card reads swish. Obviously, this is a basketball date. Demario says D stands for Demario, dunking, and defense. They continue to play. Demario's team does not win. They all go to the locker room to celebrate while Rachel meets fans on the basketball court. One of said fans is a woman named Lexi, who proceeds to tell her that Demario was her boyfriend for 7 months, and she discovered that he was coming on The Bachelorette by watching him on television. Rachel, very disappointed, calls Demario out of the locker room, confronts him, and now D stands for deny, deny, deny. But Lexi has receipts. Rachel reads the text messages, proceeds to tell Demario to get the fuck out. Yes, I think Rachel is amazing, and obviously she's very attractive, but she's usually not the type of girl I go for. Will is very smug when he says, well, I usually date white girls. Well, Eric says to Will, maybe you should tell Rachel this. On the evening portion of the date, we see Rachel ask Will what he's usually attracted to, how he is in a relationship usually. You can totally tell Rachel's posture has changed and she is completely in lawyer mode. You saw us a little bit with Demario. It's kind of like that. She's not as firm, but you can definitely tell that she is trying to use logic to get to the bottom of some shit that she's feeling. So he says, I usually date white girls. And he says that I'm usually passionate and affectionate person in a relationship. He goes on to explain he grew up in a predominantly white area, and that was mostly who was available in high school. And when he got to college, there were even less. He went to Ithaca. Everybody I know who went to Ithaca is Black, except for one person. Anyhow, Rachel goes on to explain that I grew up in a similar situation, and most of the people I've dated have mostly been Black. You can tell that at this point, Rachel has shut down. I think we're finished here. Will goes home with no date rose. Something interesting to note is Reality Steve. When we were about at the beginning of the season, Reality Steve spoiled the winner to be Peter. And a lot of people pick up those spoilers as the season is first starting. You'll see it published maybe in Us Weekly. Jimmy Kimmel used to do a segment before The Bachelor premiered. Thank you, ABC Synergy. And a lot of people suspect that he gets his information from Reality Steve. A couple of weeks later, he updates his spoiler to be Brian. But a lot of times people don't read the updates. They get the initial spoiler and they run with it. It's important to keep the edit in mind as well. Peter is so handsome. He's been so sweet. He's been so thoughtful and pensive. Brian has been over the top every time he appears on camera. There's some sort of Latin music playing in the background. They're kind of really playing up race. It's the first Black Bachelorette season. We have the drama with Will only dating white girls. And so we know that that is going to be in the foreground. We expect that. But really there's some other issues with race at play here. The way that they have really kind of pegged Brian as this Latin Lothario lover, which really kind of takes away from what he's actually doing and how thoughtful he's been on the show thus far. I mean, if you take that away, you take away all over the top proclamations and the Latin music, I mean, I think really what you're left with is this boring guy who's pushing 40 years old, who's kind of attractive, who is into this woman who is using the fact that he's mature and that she's mature to figure out how to get to know her better and to hopefully build a relationship with her. That doesn't really make for great TV, but I really think it's important when you're trying to compare Peter, who's a model who comes from Wisconsin and has those like good white bread, both senses of the word, white bread sensibilities, versus Brian, who's from Miami, who is paler skinned but has a lot of non-white qualities that we often devalue in this culture. And so having that be some of the reasons why people don't actually like him.